with spells of rain for the north and west of Scotland. Those outbreaks of rain turn more persistent and heavy at times through the night. Also, they'll start to sink further south into the rest of Scotland as well as Northern Ireland. 12 Celsius for Glasgow, Belfast, 8 for Birmingham, 10 for London. So a relatively mild start to Friday, but plenty of dry weather for England and Wales at least, with some sunshine first thing. However, cloud and rain is slowly sinking south. It arrives into northern England, North Wales by the afternoon, and it will be heavy and persistent, particularly over, say, Snowdonia and the Lake District. Feeling unpleasant under that rain, 15, 16 Celsius, 22 or even 23 or 24 for London, cooler for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but brighter skies follow with some showers. Also for northern and western Scotland, and particularly they die away through the night on Friday, whilst our area of cloud and rain sinks south, peters out as high pressure builds, and that high pressure will lead to a lot of fine and dry weather through the weekend. Bye-bye.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome to We Need to Talk About on GB News with me, Alex Phillips, where I'll be giving my take on the burning issues of the day. Keeping me company today is writer and commentator Nikki Hodgson, and here's what we're discussing on the show. Sweden says it's had assurances from the US over applying to join NATO. With Finland also reportedly applying to join next week, I'll be speaking to the country's former Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Affairs Minister. Interest rates are raised to a 13-year high in a bid to tackle inflation. But with so many people up and down the country panicking over poverty, what will it mean for you? And on the Alex agenda today, I'll be getting stuck into the Brussels officials receiving meditation training to help tackle climate change. Why? I'm as bewildered as you are. That's what we're talking about for the next hour, but what do you need to get off your chest? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet the programme at GB News. But first, it's time for the GB News headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 1 minute past 2. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB Newsroom. The Bank of England has raised its key interest rate to 1% from 0.75%. It's the fourth rate rise in a row and the highest the base rate's been since early 2009. The Monetary Policy Committee is trying to calm inflation, which it forecasts will peak at over 10% this year. The bank's also warned the economy is set to shrink next year by 0.25%. Matt Dromfield's head of Debt-Free London. He says inquiries have soared 250% since this time last year.
Many people think that you go into debt because you've splurged on a credit card or you've overspent on the weekend and not realise it. That's really not the situation whatsoever. Debt doesn't discriminate. We're all facing a cost of living crisis, with the cost of your mortgage maybe going up later today, depending on the Bank of England's announcement, your rent going up, your food going up. All these are essential costs that you can't control, and you're left with nothing at the end of the month.
There are renewed calls for the government to impose a windfall tax on energy companies after oil giant Shell reported a big increase in profits. The company revealed record first-quarter earnings of £7.2 billion, triple the amount it made in the same quarter last year. It joins rival BP in posting better-than-expected profits for the first 3 months of 2022. Surging oil and gas prices have helped offset the cost of boycotting Russian supplies. But equity analyst Keith Bowman doesn't think it'll have an effect on energy bills.
From where we stand, I don't think any great change is expected in the near future. There is the possibility, we never know, of some sort of resolution as far as the Ukraine conflict is concerned. But even if that were to happen, I think it would take some time for the relationship between the West and Russia to thaw.
Polling stations are open across the UK as millions of voters take part in local elections today. The Prime Minister took his dog Dylan with him as he cast his vote this morning. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer's also voted alongside his wife. And the Liberal Democrat's Ed Davey visited his local polling station too. Voters all over Britain are choosing local representatives in England, Scotland and Wales. And there's also an election for the Northern Ireland Assembly. In Ukraine, the governor of the eastern city of Luhansk says 5 civilians have been killed in shelling in the last 24 hours. A further 25 are reported to have been hurt in a Russian missile strike in Kramatorsk in Donetsk. The city's mayor says a school and kindergarten were damaged in the attack. Meanwhile, a Ukrainian presidential advisor says there's renewed fighting at the Azovstal steel plant in Mariupol. President Zelensky is asking the UN to help ensure the safe passage of 200 civilians from the site. Well, new ways of putting pressure on Russia following its invasion of Ukraine is on the agenda as Boris Johnson meets with his Japanese counterpart in London. The UK Prime Minister and Fumio Kishida have also agreed a new landmark defence partnership between the two countries. The pact allows British and Japanese forces to deploy together to carry out joint exercises and disaster relief. It's Mr Kishida's first official visit to the UK and was marked with an RAF flypast. Doctors are being asked to delay their retirement to help clear the COVID backlog. In a letter to staff, NHS England is asking them to stay on to help plug the 110,000 personnel shortage and help train up junior doctors. The General Medical Council says 21,000 doctors are due to retire this September. The Chief Constable at Merseyside Police has hit back at claims her force is institutionally racist. Serena Kennedy says she categorically believes it isn't true. It's after her boss, the region's police and crime commissioner, said Merseyside doesn't take into account how minorities experience policing. But Emily Spurrell says she didn't mean individual officers are racist. And Buckingham Palace says the Queen will miss the annual Royal Garden Party season. The monarch will instead be represented by other members of the royal family. Her Majesty has mobility issues and has missed a number of engagements this year, but she continues to carry out virtual appearances and other duties. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Alex and we need to talk about.
Cast your mind back to the start of the war in Ukraine and the rabble-rousers competing for cut-through by proclaiming somehow Putin's warped imperialist agenda was the fault of NATO expansion, rather than perhaps vice versa. How quiet they seem to have gone. Apart from the Pope, that is, who is clearly smarting at Putin's refusal of his papal mission to Moscow and is now seemingly extolling the Kremlin's propaganda. NATO was established during the Cold War expressly to face down the perils of a sinister Soviet Union gobbling up territory across Europe. The establishment of a peace pact to protect nations from invasion may indeed be a fly in the ointment for Putin's anachronistic desire to wind the clock back centuries to a fantastical czarist era of Russian rule. But to parrot Putin's excuses for being a warmonger, for me, is as unhinged as suggesting democracy was a provocation for Hitler. Today, as Russia again trolls the global rules-based order, the expansion of NATO to include peace-loving democracies and staunch allies who have long been taunted by their intimidating neighbour is more justified than ever before. The Russian attack on Ukraine changed the security situation across Europe, and with it, the attitudes of Scandinavians who had previously adopted a neutral stance. As Russia buzzes Finnish airspace and threatens everything from invasion to nuclear attack in typical heightened Kremlin threats, in the corridors of NATO, ways to expedite the accession process are being discussed, and rightly so. You do not appease a bully, you oppose him. Well, joining me now on the show is the former Deputy Prime Minister of Finland, Timo Soini. Timo, fantastic to have you on. What is your position on the announcement that countries such as Sweden and Finland may now be looking to join NATO after a pretty dramatic shift in public opinion? We can't hear Timo at the moment. We're going to try and get back to him because he's a very important voice on this matter. So now let's talk to Vladislav Davidson, who's fellow at the Eurasia Centre in the Atlantic Council and has recently been to Ukraine. Vladislav, what's your position on the expansion of NATO? Is it provocation or is it the right way forward and entirely justifiable?
Hi, thank you for having me on again. Look, I just came back from Ukraine yesterday. Got some relatives out. It's obviously a horrible situation. I've been to the front lines. I've seen some stuff I don't want to talk about. Clearly, bombing of Ukrainian positions, horrific fighting. Every Western democracy can make its own and should make its own decisions about its security situation. All this stuff coming out of the Kremlin for years about NATO being a threat to Russia is silly. No more than 7% of the Russian border has NATO allies on it. It's a very, very, very long border. It's the biggest country in the world by far. You can look at any map. NATO is just a very small 7% on its border. The Swedes and the Finns are going to be excellent members of NATO, and they're welcome to join.
I mean, we've seen reports today of Russian military aircraft buzzing Finnish airspace. Again, very distinct threats coming from the Kremlin about the sort of action they may take if Sweden and Finland do decide to join the alliance. Do you think that believing that is just pragmatic to try and avoid or avert potential disaster? Or is that just gobbling the Kremlin's lines and doing exactly what they want us to do?
I mean, the person who's most responsible for the enlargement of the NATO alliance over the last year is President Putin. I mean, he never really cared about the enlargement of NATO in the sense that he didn't want the Ukrainians to move west. It was just about the coupling of the Ukrainian economy with the European economy. It's increasing trade with the Europeans, increasing trade with the Poles. It was never about NATO. That was always a pretext. If they wanted to keep more European countries out of NATO, they now have Finland with a big border with the Russians in NATO, and that is a direct outcome of the invasion of February 24th. It took 2 months from the time that the Russian troops began pounding Kiev to the time that two more staunchly neutral European countries, and Finland had been neutral throughout the entire Cold War, are about to join NATO. So, to Mr. Putin, congratulations. You got what you wanted.
I mean, do you buy into any of these threats at all? Do you think that Putin is so unhinged that he would actually press the big red button in the event of NATO expansion, even if it results in essentially a zero-sum apocalypse?
I'm sure he's capable of using tactical nuclear weapons on a city in Ukraine. A tactical nuclear weapon, which the West does not have, as far as I know. They're miniaturized nukes. I'm sure the Russians are capable of blowing up, let's say, an area of downtown Kiev and killing 50,000 people and seeing what we would do. I'm sure they're capable, as they've shown in Syria, that they're willing to use biological and chemical weapons. But I don't think they would use a nuclear strike on a European Union nation as it was joining NATO. I think that would unspool an apocalypse now kind of situation, and I don't think they're that crazy. I think nuclear deterrence works, and I think we have enough nuclear weapons to destroy the entire Russian Federation. They know that. Nobody wants that.
Nobody wants that indeed. Vladislav Davidson, thank you so much for coming on the programme. Fellow at the Eurasia Centre in the Atlantic Council. Well, let's try again to speak to the former Deputy Prime Minister of Finland, Timo Soini. Timo, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Alex, indeed.
Fantastic to have you on the programme. Who better to talk to today about the prospect of Finland joining NATO than you? What is your position on this? You were also, of course, Foreign Affairs Minister.
Yeah, I was also 4 years the chair of the House of the Foreign Relations Committee, and after that also the minister for the span was roughly 8 years in the focal point. And the swift on Finnish opinion, first the people and then to the parties and decisions makers, is huge. Because before this crisis began, the support of full membership was roughly 25%. Now it's 70%. So that is a landslide swing in people's mind. And also all the political parties, except extreme left, are now for the membership.
And do you buy any of the Russian threats that Putin is lodging against your country, that if you dare join NATO, he would strike, he would put boots on the ground, he might even resort to nuclear weapons? Or do you dismiss that as Kremlin propaganda and actually see it as a reason to join NATO?
Of course, there will be some kind of a reaction, even a stronger one, but I would suspect that it would be cyber or hybrid operations of all kinds. But during my spell, we had quite a lot, several incidents with Russia by violating our airspace and all kind of harassments and spying. So we are quite used to their harsh rhetoric, but I think that they are also so surprised because we used to be non-aligned country to the military alliance for decades after the Second World War, and we cope well with that. But their cowardless onslaught and attack to Ukraine changed that, and I think that that was also a major surprise to the Russians, and we are not afraid of them. We fought them in the Second World War, and there were only 3 capitals not invaded in Europe throughout the whole Second World War. First one was Moscow, the second one was London, and the third one was Helsinki, our capital. So, but of course we know that they are capable of doing all kind of cruel things what we're now witnessing in Ukraine, but we don't think that they are actually going to attack us. But all kind of troublesome times are ahead for us and Sweden within few weeks if we send an application.
So do you want to see this process sped up now and to really send a clear and distinct message to Putin that Scandinavia will not tolerate Russian aggression and they see their future not necessarily as a neutral one, but part of a peacekeeping alliance?
Yeah, I think so, that this is quite a major surprise, both Finland and also Sweden, because Sweden has been outside of any kind of for over 200 years. And now what is going to happen in Baltic Sea? The eastern flank of the Baltic Sea are Baltic countries and Poland, and in south there is Germany. And now on the west flank there will be Finland and Sweden. And so all the Baltic Sea, which goes up as St. Petersburg, 10 million inhabitants, major city of Russia, is now surrounded by NATO countries in due course of time. And I think that was not very wise and not very predictable way to act. And I think that Russia should at least, or would regret that.
Timo, it's been an absolute privilege having you on the programme again. Let's talk again in the future as Finland's application to NATO potentially progresses. Timo Soini there, who is the former Deputy Prime Minister of Finland and the country's former Foreign Affairs Minister. Meanwhile, in the UK, the Prime Minister is hosting Japanese leader Fumio Kishida. The two leaders are expected to agree in principle a landmark new defence agreement to deepen military ties in the Indo-Pacific. Well, let's speak to GB News political correspondent Tom Harwood. Tom, what does this mean? Is this essentially a further strengthening of an alliance to face down China?
To some extent, that is what we're seeing. A new dividing line, a stronger dividing line than we have seen in previous decades between the free, democratic, free market to some extent world and the unfree world, the Russias, the Chinas that have become more assertive and more aggressive over the last 10 years. This is continuing the sort of collaboration that we have seen, particularly in the Indo-Pacific region. Of course, the Prime Minister was in India not so long ago. He's speaking to the Prime Minister of Japan today. And of course, the AUKUS deal. AUKUS being, of course, the United Kingdom, the US, and of course, Australia with that new defence collaboration as well. There's been some hints as to whether how far Japan may actually involve itself in those collaborations, not just with the UK, but with Australia and the US as well, trying to create that united front. And of course, there's so many similarities between Japan and the United Kingdom, two strong, confident island nations on opposite parts of the world, post-imperial, but still incredibly relevant, and two of the largest economies in the world as well. This is a significant visit, not just on the military side of things, but also when it comes to economics and trade, because today the Prime Minister of Japan has set out his country's firm support for the United Kingdom joining the CPTPP, the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership, a trade area of all of those countries that border the Pacific, or at least many of them. And it's a trade area worth billions and billions of dollars. This is something that could be really quite a shift in our economic prosperity as well. So yes, firming those relations between free nations around the world to face those despotic threats that now seem more prevalent in today's world.
Tom, thank you so much. Well, Nikki, what are your positions on all of this? I mean, we've had the Pope intervening today, saying that NATO's essentially been barking at Russia's door, and this has potentially been provocative. And now we're learning that countries like Sweden and Finland have always adopted a position of neutrality so as not to provoke their neighbours, saying, in the light of what's happened in Ukraine, we need to protect ourselves. We want to be part of NATO. Where do you come down on this one?
Well, I mean, I completely understand, given the circumstances and the horrific things we've seen in recent weeks, why Sweden and Finland would want to get off that neutral post and say, no, we actually feel genuinely threatened. And it would be morally irresponsible of their governments to just say, we're just going to sit here and wait and see what happens, even though all our citizens are feeling increasingly afraid. Of course, the judgment to join NATO has to be done so carefully so as to not tip this balance of power that seems so fragile at the moment. But I do completely understand why it might be high time for them to get off their neutral posts.
Nikki Hodgson, thank you so much. I want to know your views on the issue of NATO expansion. You know what I think. You do not oppose, do not appease a bully like Putin. You oppose him. But what do you think? Do you think NATO expansion is provocative? Email me, gbnews@gbnews.uk, or tweet us at GBNews. You're with GB News on TV and radio. Coming up, what impact would the increase in impact rates have on the cost of living crisis? Time for a short break now and a check on the weather forecast.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Dry for many today with sunny spells, but there will be still some rain in the far northwest, mainly northern and western parts of Scotland, because of a number of weather fronts which are just toppling in over an area of high pressure. However, high pressure really here to stay for the next few days. That's going to lead to a lot of fine and dry weather, whilst these weather fronts will occasionally bring rain, mainly to the northern half of the UK. So a few showers for northern England, perhaps one or two showers developing over the West Midlands and parts of Wales into the afternoon. Otherwise, a lot of fine, dry weather for England and Wales, sunny spells in places, some thicker cloud at times for the Midlands. And with the sunny spells, temperatures reaching 22, perhaps 23 Celsius in the southeast. Cooler there towards the northwest, mid-teens. And for Scotland and Northern Ireland, a cloudy day with spells of rain for the north and west of Scotland. Those outbreaks of rain turn more persistent and heavy at times through the night. Also, they'll start to sink further south into the rest of Scotland as well as Northern Ireland. 12 Celsius for Glasgow, Belfast, 8 for Birmingham, 10 for London. So a relatively mild start to Friday, but plenty of dry weather for England and Wales at least, with some sunshine first thing. However, cloud and rain is slowly sinking south. It arrives into northern England, North Wales by the afternoon, and it will be heavy and persistent, particularly over, say, Snowdonia and the Lake District. Feeling unpleasant under that rain, 15, 16 Celsius, 22 or even 23 or 24 for London, cooler for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but brighter skies follow with some showers also for northern and western Scotland, and particularly they die away through the night on Friday, whilst our area of cloud and rain sinks south, peters out as high pressure builds, and that high pressure will lead to a lot of fine and dry weather through the weekend. Bye-bye.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
People say economics is an art form, not a science. Well, numbers never lie. Social behavioural changes, political events and decisions made in other countries all have an impact on fluctuations in our own economy and are notoriously hard to precisely predict. When to raise interest rates to try to bring down inflation is a delicate balance. Getting it wrong can have devastating effects. Surely, during a cost of living crisis, putting pounds in the pockets of the poorest is the government's duty. But the government today doesn't want to do that, worried that by increasing spending power, they would only add fuel to the fire of soaring prices and trigger the Bank of England to whack up interest rates to double digits to try to douse the flames. It may seem cruel, but is it actually the best medicine? Yet it begs an important question. There are those in society who are profiting enormously from soaring energy costs and growing property prices, those at the very top. And for a Prime Minister who has tried to secure his Brexit red wall support by pledging to level up the country, the policy at present seems to do anything but. Well, Rosie Wright joins us now. Rosie, you've been speaking to people about those in debt. What have you been learning around the country?
A very good afternoon to you, Alex. Yes, I'm at Hope Cafe right now, actually in this beautiful church in South London. And the premise of it really is to provide a space where there's no prices for the food on offer, that people can turn up. It's donation only. But crucially, people here are able to get free debt advice, and there's a real need for it. One of the church wardens, Geraldine, is with me now. Geraldine, just explain, why was it? It's a few months ago you realised there's real need for this in this community.
Yes, absolutely. So it was really during lockdown we realised the need, and there were more people that our vicar would see in shops or that would come to him needing food vouchers or needing help of one sort or another. So we really thought it was a good time to employ a CAP, a community worker here in the parish of Herne Hill. So that's what we went ahead and did as PCC. We decided that was a good idea. And from that, after lockdown, when we came out of lockdown, we were allowed to have cafes opening again. We decided to have this Hope Cafe, as you said, for people that can't afford it. They can come along, and people that can afford it can come along and pay, and then that way hopefully we balance it out, and it wouldn't really matter if we didn't, but that's what we aim for, and we just want to be able to help everyone in the community really, and there's great need here. It's a very mixed area. Some people have a lot of money and some people don't have very much money at all, so it's really, really lovely that we can have this and have everybody coming together.
And just give us an idea of the type of support that's on offer, because it's not just sitting down and having a chat. You can get advice on how to write your CV.
Absolutely. We run a job club, and that runs for about 6 weeks, I believe, and once a week you come along and different people will come and help out, and we give interviews, skills workshops, and help with writing your CV and where to look for work and how employees go about choosing people to work for them, and that's really helpful. And here we also do debt coaching, like I think you mentioned earlier, and also we run a money course for students that are about to go away to university. And in fact, I've been on the money course here because they said it's for everybody. It's not just if you're in debt or not, and it's really useful to look through and see, crikey, I actually spend that much on a coffee in a restaurant each week, and I really shouldn't be doing that, or I could put that money somewhere else, or it just is really good to be aware.
There's some fantastic work being done here, but there's also heartbreaking stories. I mean, people turning up with plastic bags full of documents that they're just too scared or don't have the confidence to be able to sort through themselves.
I think that's right. I think it's really worrying for people once they get into debt to know how to get out of it. And often you get these letters through the post and you open them and it's, red bill, and it's, someone's going to come and take your stuff away, and the sort of panic that I think is instilled in people from that is really, really hard. And it's how to get across to people there is some help out there, and you can come to a CAP debt counsellor and they can help you. Yes, as you say, you come with all your paperwork and they will go through it with you. They'll put it into the format that it has to be, and then CAP will look at it and talk to people who you're in debt with, and somehow it gets worked through, and the idea is that in the end you can become debt free, and it's manageable and people are on your side and you don't have to go through it alone.
Geraldine, thank you very much for having us this afternoon. Alex, this is just one place of many and people that I've spoken to today. There was a debt advice line I spoke to this morning, and since the beginning of the year, their calls, the volume of calls have gone up 250%. There are so many people in communities like this, as Geraldine just said, that's a real mixed area of people with lots of money and people with very little, who are realising the cost of living is starting to soar. Maybe if you've got credit card debt and now interest rates have gone up today, this is a situation that is getting worse, and there are some places like this of people desperate to help those people.
Rosie, thank you ever so much for that report. Well, let's bring back in my studio guest, author and commentator, Nikki Hodgson. Nikki, I mean, look, I don't profess to being an economist at all. I don't understand it for love nor money. But the government's excuse, they don't want to put up universal credit because it might actually further fuel inflation, which in turn would then mean the Bank of England puts up interest rates, just doesn't work out for me, because people on universal credit aren't going out buying iPhones and luxury items. This is about simple things, food, heating their homes. I mean, what on earth is going on?
Well, I couldn't agree more with you. I mean, since the Tories came into power, we have seen people become poorer, the majority of people. You know, we have 2 million people using food banks now. We've got children that are going hungry. We had to have a footballer step in to get children fed. Remember that campaign from Marcus Rashford? And the reality is people are choosing now between things like heating and eating. They're not spending money on fripperies or luxuries. They can't live in the most basic way. And we are one of the richest countries in the world. It is just ridiculous that we have such a discrepancy when it comes to people being able to pay for the basics. And, you know, the Conservatives have had so much time to sort out this ongoing problem. You know, they've seen things coming down the line, like the energy crisis. They've decided to take £20 a week off the poorest people. You know, they have created this problem for us.
We have to be very delicate, of course. People are indeed voting today, and there's no evidence that Labour would be doing any better. And there are, of course, a lot of extraneous influences going on. War in Ukraine, the energy crisis. So a lot of thorny details to get through. But, Nikki, really value your input there. You're with GB News on TV and DAB Radio. After the break, concerns that social media is glorifying irreversible gender transition surgery, particularly to girls and young women. Now, though, it's time for a check on the news headlines.
Thank you, Alex. It's 2:33. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The Bank of England has raised interest rates for the fourth time in a row from 0.75% to 1%, their highest level since 2009. The Monetary Policy Committee is trying to calm inflation, which it forecasts will peak at over 10% this year. The banks also warn the economy is set to shrink next year by 0.25%. There are renewed calls for the government to impose a windfall tax on energy companies after oil giant Shell reported a big increase in profits. The company revealed record first-quarter profits of £7.2 billion, triple the amount it made in the same quarter last year. Surging oil and gas prices have helped offset the cost of boycotting Russian supplies. The Prime Minister took his dog Dylan with him as he cast his vote for the local elections this morning. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer's also voted alongside his wife. The Liberal Democrat's Ed Davey was seen visiting his local polling station too. Voters are choosing local representatives in England, Scotland and Wales, and there will also be an election for the Northern Ireland Assembly. Ukraine's Prime Minister says his country's received over £9.5 billion worth of weapons and financial aid since Russia's invasion. That as President Zelensky's asked the UN to help ensure the safe passage of 200 more civilians from Azovstal steel plant in Mariupol. A presidential advisor says there's renewed fighting at the steelworks in the besieged port city. The UK and Japan have agreed a new landmark defence deal as the Prime Minister hosts his Japanese counterpart in London. It's Fumio Kishida's first official visit to the UK. The pact allows British and Japanese forces to deploy together to carry out joint exercises and disaster relief. And the Queen will miss the Royal Garden Party season. The monarch will instead be represented by other members of the royal family. Her Majesty has mobility issues and has missed a number of events this year, but she continues to carry out virtual appearances and other duties. TV online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. It's back to Alex and we need to talk about in just a moment.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates and strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to We Need to Talk About. This is GB News and I'm Alex Phillips. Now, you can't get a tattoo in this country until you are 18. And now the government has brought in legislation to stop young girls getting cosmetic surgery due to the growing trend for pumped-up lips and stretched faces through the perverse phenomenon of selfie dysphoria. Apps such as Instagram are effectively brainwashing teenagers in wanting to look like the improbable fantasy faces they create using filters. Yet when it comes to one of the most brutal, irreversible and life-changing decisions a person might make, tethered to another psychological condition, gender dysphoria, a woke mob seems intent on silencing anyone who stands against stopping youngsters taking hormone blockers to prevent puberty, or little girls removing their breasts in what is creepily referred to as top surgery. Yet social media platforms appear to be awash with videos encouraging just that, with what I believe are devastating results. Girls in increasing numbers are being referred to gender identity services, despite the condition of gender dysphoria historically being 3 times more prevalent among males. In 2009, just 70 children went to the Tavistock and Portsmouth Gender Identity Service to transition. 10 years later, that number is a breathtaking 37 times higher. A decade ago, 75% of the children questioning their birth sex were boys. But in the past few years, it is girls who make up almost 3/4 of patients. What is going on? And is this a dangerous and tragic public health crisis spiralling out of control? Well, joining me now is the author Laura Dodsworth, who has recently written about this very issue, as well as covering the stories of young women who have regretted having surgery to make them more masculine, only later to detransition. Laura, how did this come to your attention?
Well, I've been aware of content which is very welcoming of people who are gender dysphoric on social media for a long time. It's not a new thing, actually. You can find lots of very positive content on YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat and the rest. But Pink News recently advertised they're producing a new series called Pure Trans Joy, and I watched the first episode and I was really surprised because while it's a video that's designed to be very positive for trans men, so that's women who identify as men and have gone on to have what they call top surgery, bilateral mastectomy for treating their gender dysphoria. This video didn't really create any, it didn't contain any balance or caveats, any words of caution. It just talked about the euphoria of top surgery. It used words like freedom, joy, euphoria, even the bliss of fairy dust. It presented an extremely uncritical view of top surgery. Now, you just ran through some figures there. Something has been going on in the last decade where the case ratio of people presenting to gender identity clinics has changed. Now, you would think the gender identity clinics would have a handle on why that's changed, but they don't. They haven't really been assessing it. And part of that is probably because the approach when young people go to doctors is to be affirmative in their gender. But I know from my research of interviewing and photographing women for a project I did around detransitioners that the reasons for gender dysphoria can be quite complex. They can be related to sexual abuse, neurodiversity, body dysmorphia, being a lesbian and maybe experiencing homophobia. Now, the interim report from the CAST review, which is investigating young people's experience of gender identity clinics, has acknowledged that for some people, their gender identity doesn't settle until their mid-20s. So this particular video, called Pure Trans Joy, for me contained some red flags. The biggest demographic on Snapchat, which is the platform that hosts it, is 13 to 17-year-old girls. This is quite a vulnerable group of girls who can be influenced on Snapchat. You talked about selfie dysmorphia, who may have lots of different things going on in their life. And this video could teach them that any body dysmorphia or mental discomfort they have is gender dysphoria. And what's more, that the way to treat that is quite radical and irreversible surgery.
Laura, what do you think? I mean, do you think there's a whole element of society now imposing such strong standards of beauty on young girls that there are girls out there who essentially think life would be easier as a male and are actually resorting to taking such drastic measures as, in many cases, irreversible surgeries to do that, when actually gender dysphoria is a psychological condition?
Yeah, I think that could be part of it. Look, anyone who's a woman knows that there can be a stage in puberty where you can feel alarmed, uncomfortable, maybe even reject your womanhood. You know, that time when your body starts developing can be very uncomfortable. Your body can project you into womanhood before you're ready. Add to that more complicated experiences that some young girls will have had. Add to that all the pressures on social media. There's one that's actually termed Snapchat dysphoria. And you can see that what we have here online is a big melting pot of confusion. Now, nobody would say that the internet itself can make you trans. That would be ludicrous. But there is an emerging hypothesis called rapid onset gender dysphoria by Dr. Lisa Littman. And it sets out that people can acquire feelings of gender dysphoria through a process of peer and social contagion. And that's really why videos like this one, Pure Trans Joy, really should contain balance, be very aware of the audience that they're reaching. Now, if this video was about breast enhancement surgery, I think there would be a very censorious and angry outcry. And in fact, something like that would be restricted by forthcoming Advertising Standards Authority regulations that are going to come into force this month, where plastic surgery shouldn't be targeting young people.
I'm just going to bring in Nikki on this as well. I mean, Nikki, you have a slightly different view to Laura, don't you, in terms of, you know, whether or not young people should be able to access these services and the rate at which people want to detransition after going through that process.
Yeah, so it's not really that I believe young people should be accessing the services in a different way. It's more that I think we are getting the impact of detransitioning out of perspective in terms of the amount of people that do transition and feel comfortable afterwards. So I think what Laura's done is fantastic in highlighting this very, very urgent issue that some people do transition and have massive regrets about it and didn't receive the right kind of therapy and information at the time to inform their decisions. But actually, if you look at some of the American research done on people that transition and the effect afterwards, less than 7% of them say they regret transitioning. And of the people that do regret it, actually, a big factor is parental disapproval. So I think it's really important to look at the whole picture of how many people have the surgery and feel good about it and how many don't, as well as getting to the root of why it is more girls that are coming forward for the treatment.
And do you think, based on that, if we are looking at this huge upsurge in the numbers of people accessing this kind of treatment and the fact that it is now proportionally more girls than boys, when actually historically it suggests that the trend has actually been in the other direction, and that I think it's about 3 times more men tend to suffer gender dysphoria than women, that there's potentially a public health crisis going on right now and we're not talking about it?
Well, again, we have to get the numbers into perspective, because we only have about 500,000 trans people in the UK, so we're talking about a very small pool of people. But the other thing that's interesting, thinking about the increase in women coming forward, is that perhaps historically they didn't have the confidence to say that they felt locked into the wrong body in the way that men did. We know that increasing numbers of people feel able to say that they are trans now because of information in the media and a more positive portrayal of what it might be like to live a trans life. But at the same time, we have to really interrogate the data. We have terrible investigation into the lives of trans people. We don't have enough scientific research, and we need to really put our money and our time into that now.
And coming back to Laura, do you think there's an inherent danger of medical conditions? Because in many respects, gender dysphoria is a medical condition, a psychological condition. Do you believe there's an inherent danger in something like that essentially becoming fashionable? I'm not sure we've still got Laura with us, so I will leave that where it is. Thank you so much for Laura. Oh, there you are, Laura. You are still with us. Yeah, so I was asking whether you think
I'd like to just challenge something that Nikki said. Now, you know, there are transgender activists who have said that the increase in numbers is due to increased visibility in society and increased acceptability of being transgender. Now, that is good, but I'm afraid it doesn't explain the mix in the ratio of boys to girls. And in fact, you talked about a public health crisis. I think our gender identity clinics have been completely remiss in tracking what's causing this case mix ratio.
Laura Dodsworth, Nikki Hodgson, thank you so much. Interesting and very timely debate, I would say. So thank you both for bringing that to our audience's attention. Well, moving on, there are reports that the Queen is becoming increasingly immobile and as a result is having to miss a sequence of royal duties, something about which the nation is, of course, extremely concerned. We can cross now to our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, for the latest. Cameron.
Hi there, Alex. Yes, so Buckingham Palace has confirmed this morning that Her Majesty will not be attending any of the annual garden parties this year. Of course, it's an annual tradition. It gives the royal family a chance to give thanks to local members of the community who've done kind of good deeds and volunteering work. The last couple of years, it hasn't happened because of the coronavirus pandemic, and this year was meant to be, you know, kind of the big comeback for it. But we understand that other members of the royal family are going to be taking Her Majesty's place. Now, from speaking to people inside the palace this morning, I understand that the reason for it, if you look at Her Majesty, pictures of Her Majesty at previous garden parties, it's long periods of standing. And if they're very, very long, these garden parties, and we know Her Majesty has mobility issues. So that perhaps was one of the reasons as to why she decided to pull out a couple of weeks before the garden parties take place. But it's just the latest in a long list of engagements that Her Majesty has missed. She missed the Commonwealth Day service back in March, and then in April, of course, she missed the annual Maundy Thursday service just before that Easter weekend. Prince Charles, her son, and the Duchess of Cornwall took her place. And there's speculation, of course. Buckingham Palace has not confirmed whether or not she will be attending the state opening of Parliament next week. So I guess we'll have to wait and see, Alex.
I mean, it's been an extremely torrid year for the Queen, of course, first losing her husband. And people often say, don't they, that that people who've been in a long-term companionship as the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh were can, in many respects, see a demise as a result of heartbreak. But on top of that, of course, there have been all the dramas associated with Prince Andrew and then Harry and Meghan. I mean, it really has been a tough time for her.
It certainly has indeed, and this is the year of Her Majesty's Platinum Jubilee, celebrating 70 years on the throne. Of course, she was very determined, Her Majesty, to make it to that Westminster Abbey service, the service of thanksgiving for her husband, the Duke of Edinburgh, who died last year. But then, of course, as you mentioned, the controversy of of Prince Andrew escorting her down the aisle. She, as we said, she's immobile. She was using a walking stick. But just today, this afternoon, Her Majesty was continuing to carry out royal duties. She attended a virtual engagement meeting the new St Lucia High Commissioner. So she's still very much doing royal duties, but I think the palace are perhaps prioritising which event she is going to be attending, because they'll want to make sure she's fit and able to be there at the Platinum Jubilee celebrations in June.
Cameron, thank you ever so much. Now I'm going to talk again to my studio guest today, Nikki Hodgson. It's the Queen's Jubilee. We should all be thinking about celebrating her incredible, glorious reign. She's a record breaker, the world's longest-serving monarch, the world's longest-serving female monarch, and much beloved. But the latest lack of visibility of the Queen is sort of making us ask the question of what's next? What will be the future of the monarchy after that, after the second Elizabethan era?
Well, absolutely. Unfortunately, we do have to look forward to a time when the Queen won't be around, and we have Prince Charles and Camilla instead on the throne. And, you know, to give the Queen her due, she is 95 years old. How many other 95-year-olds do you know that would have the schedule that she's had for so many years, you know? So I think, you know, it's interesting because you sort of see the media coverage now, the papers covering stories about Camilla. There's a new biography of her coming out. The stage has been set for their entry. But it's just, we just have to, you know, we have to anticipate that they will be coming soon. And at the same time, we have to kind of get invested in them, because do we have the same affection for them as we do the Queen? Well, probably not at this stage. So, you know, they've got a very difficult job in following the Queen, obviously. But that time will come.
How much do you think some of these recent scandals have in fact hurt the monarchy? You know, the Prince Andrew stories, the departure of Meghan and Harry. Do you think those are things that the royal family can ultimately traverse? Or do you think that essentially we're moving into an era now where monarchy might soon become something of the past?
Well, I think what we need is for monarchy to become more accountable. And to date, they haven't needed to be. You know, they have just operated and, you know, done their duties, and nobody's needed to judge them, and they haven't worried about it. But, you know, we're not a republic, but we very well could be in the near future. And the modern royal family is very aware of that. You know, William and Kate certainly know that they have to do really good service for the people of Britain in order for them to stay in favour. So, you know, with Charles and Camilla, they're very much in this transitional phase of mapping that out for them.
And Nikki, finally, what do you think are going to be the most defining elements of the legacy of the Queen?
Well, I think it will be something to do with the breadth of the people that she's entertained at Buckingham Palace. You know, how many prime ministers and world leaders has she kind of seen come through her doors? The number of truly historic events which she's presided over. You know, she was a princess herself when war broke out, and she became queen. And the world has changed so much during her reign. The world which, you know, she came to the throne in is completely different to the modern world now. So I think, you know, just as a figure, she's incredible for having spanned so much social and technological change.
Nikki, fantastic answer. It's been wonderful having you in the studio today. Thankfully, you were here to help guide me through it all. The wonderful Nikki Hodgson. That is about it for now. Join me again for We Need to Talk About on GB News at the same time from 2 o'clock tomorrow. And for those of you eagle-eyed viewers who might have seen some ninja-like minions crawling around on the floor trying to save me by moving cameras about, well, we all do love a bit of comedy, don't we? It's been a long time since GB News had some throes of technological woes like that. So I hope you were patient with it, and my sincerest apologies. Coming up next, it's the briefing with Darren McCaffrey. But first, though, it's time for the weather forecast.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Dry for many today with sunny spells, but there will be still some rain in the far northwest, mainly northern and western parts of Scotland, because of a number of weather fronts which are just toppling in over an area of high pressure. However, high pressure really here to stay for the next few days. That's going to lead to a lot of fine and dry weather, whilst these weather fronts will occasionally bring rain, mainly to the northern half of the UK. So a few showers for northern England, perhaps 1 or 2 showers developing over the West Midlands and parts of Wales into the afternoon. Otherwise, a lot of fine, dry weather for England and Wales, sunny spells in places, some thicker cloud at times for the Midlands. And with the sunny spells, temperatures reaching 22, perhaps 23 Celsius in the southeast. Cooler there towards the northwest, mid-teens. And for Scotland and Northern Ireland, a cloudy day with spells of rain for the north and west of Scotland. Those outbreaks of rain turn more persistent and heavy at times through the night. Also, they'll start to sink further south into the rest of Scotland as well as Northern Ireland. 12 Celsius for Glasgow, Belfast, 8 for Birmingham, 10 for London.